Now we need to move on, I suppose, to the main story of the day. And if this doesn't get you cross as well, then I don't know what will. So, video of Tory staffers dancing madly at a Christmas bash. I mean, could it look any more Tory? Christmas braces and an appalling jumper, and someone who's wearing a Labour dress for some reason. This happened at CCHQ, Christmas 2020, which, if anyone can remember, that's the Christmas that we had cancelled. Right, that's the Christmas that Boris Johnson said, I don't want to cancel Christmas, and then had to. It's the Christmas after which he wanted to reopen schools on like the 4th of January and then had to shut them again on the 5th because it was a bad idea. That's the Christmas in which these people were dancing like that. Now, it says in the paper today, Ben, that the police are looking into this. So what's going to happen as a result, we think?
Right. Now, this party, it's been reported before, and there's been still images from it before, photographs, published about 18 months ago when the Mirror first started reporting on what had gone on with lockdown-busting parties in Number 10 in Whitehall and in parts of the Conservative Party. But this is the first time that video has emerged, moving footage. Now, when police originally looked at the stills, they said there wasn't enough evidence, and when they spoke to people, there wasn't enough evidence to fine anyone for their attendance at this party. Now the video has emerged. Well, obviously that puts a different light on it. I mean, the two people involved with the dancing, that's Malin Bogue and Jack Smith. Now, Malin Bogue, she worked on Boris Johnson's 2019 leadership campaign, and Jack Smith, he now works for the Energy Minister, Graham Stewart. But this was part of Sean Bailey, who is the Tory candidate at the time to become London Mayor. This was his campaign team. So they're both seconded to it. You can see they're becoming quite energetic in their dancing, almost knocking the wine glasses. Well, I did knock wine glasses over there. This video, obviously, is being seen by an awful lot of people now, including the Metropolitan Police. So they said yesterday that, they're aware of the video and they're examining it. Now, they haven't said they'll formally investigate yet. But the way this works is they'll look at the video, see does that constitute new evidence? Well, obviously it does because they didn't have it before. And then they'll decide whether or not to formally launch an investigation. Now, you have to think that looking at that, they would, because if you're not supposed to be within 2 meters of people under guidance, and of course social distancing rules were in place, they're literally holding hands as they're dancing and twirling each other.
Underneath a sign that says keep 2 meters distance. It's on that behind them. It's really good.
That's one aspect to this row, and obviously the COVID inquiry is just starting its second week today. David Cameron's up giving evidence at the COVID inquiry to Baroness Heather Hallett and her team. So that reopens it. Of course, we've got the Privileges Committee report is in Parliament today. That's the one that said Boris Johnson is a liar who lied and lied and lied again. So MPs are possibly going to vote on that. It's more likely there'll be no opposition to it and it'll just go through on the nod. But it keeps this whole narrative of Partygate in the public consciousness more than 18 months after it was first revealed. And it keeps... Rishi Sunak is desperate to move on from this. Let's not forget he was fined himself for attending Boris Johnson's birthday party 3 years ago today. Happy birthday, former Prime Minister. The other thing to bear in mind with this video is it was Sean Bailey's campaign, right? Now, he, in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list, has just been made appear. He's off to the House of Lords. Now, he left the party before these two started dancing and before the video was shot. But he still, it was his party for his team, right? And he's apologised and said it shouldn't have happened, etc., etc. And he wasn't there when this particular video was shot. But there are calls now for him to either relinquish his peerage or for Rishi Sunak to stop it. Constitutionally, I don't think he can stop it now. It's too late. But of course, Sean Bailey could look at that and think, that was my team. How did I lead them by example if they thought this was okay? So he is under pressure to stand down from the House of Lords. Another chap who is at the party to start with got an OBE in Boris Johnson's resignation on his list. That's a chap called Ben Mallet. So neither of those two are involved in this dancing, but people who were there at that party, that now looks even worse, now we've got a hold of this video, they were honoured in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list, and predictably Labour and the Lib Dems are saying that they should give up those honours, or that Rishi Sunak should intervene and strip them of them. I don't think Rishi Sunak will intervene and strip them of those honours. It's entirely possible that Sean Bailey and Ben Mallet might look at that video and think, is this a great look? Maybe I should do the decent thing and give up the gong.
Maybe, because he's, of course, he's the one in the red braces, Ben Mallet, and that you can see in the video, and he's very close to other people that he's talking and drinking with, and it's quite plainly he's breaking the 2-metre rule as well. So one would have thought that, you know, the police are, as you say, watching the video in the same way that everyone else is, and unlike everybody else, don't know yet whether or not it shows something's gone wrong. But the original investigation into that video, like you say, was closed for a lack of evidence. Now we've got the evidence, and it should be pointed out, if the Mirror can find the evidence, then the blasted Metropolitan Police should have been able to look through people's phones and find something. You would have thought they've actually got the power to do that. We do not. We have to wait for someone to give it to us. Lazy says, will episode 2 be Boris leading the conga? Oh, God, no, I hope not. Now, those two dancers, as you said, Ben, have been ID'd, but they've given no comment. Sean Bailey resigned on the spot when that news about that party first broke. But OBE for Jack Smith, who works for a minister, who's maybe going to find that job a little bit more difficult from now on. But, you know, one of the things that sort of happened around all this time was there's been one instance, as far as I can tell, of Labour being accused of partying during the restrictions, which was Keir Starmer's beer and curry issue with Angela Rayner, which the police looked into and said was fine. It was a work event because it was between campaigning. But we've had Bernard Jenkin from the Parliamentary Standards Committee. Apparently his wife was inviting people to birthday drinks and he went along. We've had this party. We've got an entire spreadsheet full of stuff that the Tories, Boris Johnson and Carrie, got up to in Downing Street and at Chequers, and various Tory staffers, people inside Downing Street doing these things. In your view, Ben, am I making a leap to say that there is something about Tory ideology which says the rules are not for us? Or is it current people in power that seem to think that? Or is that just people in power in general? Is it not about a party? Because it seems to be it's the Conservatives that have most of these allegations about them. And there's got to be some reason for that, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the problem, it's one of those like Donald Rumsfeld known unknowns. We don't know what others were getting up to, because it just might not have come out yet and probably won't. I'm not saying they were getting up to anything, but what we have reported on, and the Mirror sort of led the way on this, of course, it has focused on the Conservatives, and that is, you know, the extent of breaking rules and the not following their own guidance they issued. And of course, the reason it's certainly more pertinent that it's the Conservatives, but they were the ones who imposed these rules, guidance on the rest of us, off and on for 18 months, I think it was in the end. Because they were setting the rules, and the vast majority of us are abiding by them, well, it's beholden on them to set an example and to abide by them themselves. And then each picture that comes out, now video, just shows that they weren't doing that. And, you know, in that piece that's in the paper today, the extraordinary public anger, and particularly from the families of victims who, you know, saw their loved ones die from coronavirus, were following rules, in many cases often couldn't go and visit them, or when funerals happened, there was a limited attendance at a funeral. You had to sit on your own at a funeral, no more than 30 people, etc., etc. And then this video comes out and you see two young people working for the Conservative Party mayoral candidate's campaign dancing away as if it's just a normal Christmas party. And of course, there were, you know, we didn't have Christmas parties, most of us that year. It was just, you know, banned for, well, it was literally banned. You know, we didn't have them until months later. So, yeah, the huge public anger is focused on the Conservative Party for this, because it's come out that they were the ones who did break the rules.
What do you think, everybody? Have you got a problem with this video, or do you think it's fair enough? Because, I mean, these weren't the people in Downing Street really making the rules. They happen to be working for the Conservative Party, and they're in a basement at CCHQ. They've probably been working together all week, and so they thought they weren't increasing any infection risk maybe to party together. But I don't know, Ben, why people who are running a campaign like this need to all be there. Everyone else at this time was Zooming. Children were Zooming from home to do schools, to do their lessons. So, I mean, why did, you know, the head of a social media campaign and the head of something else and the policy, blah, blah, have to be in the same room? These are all white collar jobs. You could do all of this, as we all were, from our back bedrooms, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely you can. You know, you could meet up for work purposes unless you could work from home, right? Now, the vast majority of us doing desk jobs, essentially, were working from home. And sometimes that was difficult, because having a face-to-face conversation with a colleague would have been a lot easier than dealing with Zoom that was going down and internet freezing and all the rest of it. sometimes dodgy mobile phone signals, and it was damn frustrating sometimes. And it would have been a lot easier to be in the office and have those conversations. But you made it work. That was what we were all doing because that was what we were told to do. So then to find out that some people weren't even just working from home, but when they were meeting up for those essential work meetings, they were then getting smashed and dancing the night away. It's quite annoying, isn't it?
It is rather. Now, what do you think, everybody? Do you think that this is just a uniquely Tory issue? Do you think that there is some correlation between being conservative with a capital C and being a member of the party, conservative enough to be a member of the party, and breaking these rules? Am I just drawing too much of a line here? Because I don't think that historically Tory ideology says we don't need to care about other people or think about others or be considerate. I do think, though, perhaps that the current people in government, regardless of party, to be honest, not a political point, but the people who are currently running the government seem to be of a clique of people who from the top down, Ben, from Boris Johnson downwards, never seem to think that the rules really applied. And if you've got that person at the top and they recruit people underneath them who support them and so on and so forth down the ladder, eventually you get junior staffers who aren't being told or aren't having it shown to them that considering other people and self-sacrifice and following the rules is something they ought to be doing. Well, that's the problem, isn't it?
Boris Johnson's always thought that the rules that apply to normal people don't apply to him. There's some anecdote about, it's not an anecdote, it was a school report when he was at Eton. One of his schoolmasters in his end of term report said he genuinely thinks the rules that apply to everyone else don't apply to him. And that was when Boris was like 12 or 13. So when you think back to that 45, 46 years ago, and he's carried on living his life like that, when he then gets into Downing Street and he's the Prime Minister, he sets the tone, he sets the example. If everyone, essentially have to run riot at number 10 because he lets them get away with it, because he's not serious, he doesn't have formal strictures and proprieties, then people do think they can, the night before Prince Philip's funeral, get drunk and play on a swing in the garden. That's the sort of thing that happens. I should say, you certainly don't get that impression now from Rishi Sunak's number 10 operation. So yes, he was fined walking into the cabinet room 3 years ago today, Boris Johnson's birthday, and accepting a glass of squash or whatever it was, because he doesn't drink, remember. So he was fined the same number of times as Boris Johnson. Many people around Rishi Sunak feel that's deeply unfair. That's not for me to say whether it's fair or not. What I would say is it's a more professional operation now. You can't imagine that if Rishi Sunak was in charge during coronavirus, those parties would have happened. You certainly can't imagine if Theresa May was in charge during coronavirus, those parties would have happened. No. Number 10 was one of the most unhappiest places in the country at the time under Theresa's rule.
They were just drinking quietly under their desks on their own and weeping. They weren't actually partying. It's like one point. It's not a conservative ideological thing that other people don't matter. Gordon Brown, likewise, it wouldn't have happened, I dare say, under him if he'd been in charge. It just seems to be something which is unique to the current people, or the people we have had at the top of that tree. I mean, Lady Ashley on Twitter says they should all be given prison sentences. Dee says it boils down to if they did wrong, there should be consequences. It's not like they're young kids misbehaving. They knew what they were doing. There was a sign on the wall over their head, Dee. I mean, it's not difficult. Everyone in the country knew. This kind of time, everyone else was walking. If you had to go in public, you're walking around with your hands in your pockets and trying not to cough, and you're masked up and everything. This is 2020. This is the first year of the whole thing. It hadn't even been a year by that point. Matt says, I have an issue with the Met Police. I find it difficult to believe they didn't know this was going on and they couldn't get hold of the video evidence. This is why trust in the police is so low. They could have got hold of that video evidence because it's plainly from someone who was at the party, isn't it, Ben? It's plainly someone at the party has had it, has kept it for 3 years and has now provided it to the Mirror. So...
I don't actually know where that video's come from. It's not my story.
No, but it's obviously someone who was filming it.
Someone who there has filmed it originally. We don't know if they're the ones. Well, I don't know if they're the ones.
It's been passed around maybe, but it's found its way to the Mirror. So someone who was at that party had this video, and the police interviewed everyone at that party, or tried to. So they should have said, "Have you got a video of it? Have you got any evidence that we can have?" And either someone lied to the police at the time, or they just didn't ask the question. They didn't.
It does seem, thinking back to the original police investigation, such as it did appear there was a reluctance to get involved initially. And it was only when more and more evidence by us and by other media outlets was brought to light that eventually the Met Police did get involved. And you got the impression, certainly looking from the outside, that they just wanted it to go away as quickly as soon as possible. Should bear in mind as well, of course, that in part of the preparations for the COVID inquiry, Boris Johnson handed over diaries, journals, and some messages, WhatsApp messages, to the Cabinet Office, to their lawyers who are preparing the government's case for the COVID inquiry. And they found, I think, 16 instances that they've reported to both the Met Police and Thames Valley Police. Thames Valley Police, of course, covering Chequers, the Prime Minister's country retreat in Buckinghamshire. 16 incidents that they think might merit police investigation over other parties that hadn't been investigated before. So that's very much a watch this space.
Yeah, and they described those 16 instances as, quote, problematic. The Cabinet Office calling it problematic, well, Minister. It's the sticky wicket and no mistake. So we'll have to see perhaps how some of that pans out. But it's worth, like you said, Ben, the police only seem to have investigated any of this because they've been embarrassed into doing so. It's so much the same reason perhaps that the nuclear veterans got their medal. It's because the government was embarrassed into doing it. That seems to be the only way we get these people to do stuff. Now, Dee, hello, Dee, you're back again. The pub owners who had lock-in parties had fines, so why not these people having fines? I'm sure with the amount of police standing outside and security, they knew what was going on. I think, wasn't there something at the time, actually? No, this was, I can remember now, that the party at CCHQ was one where there were some doors damaged, and it actually went to the top of it got reported to the top of the party at the time, as I recall. And a couple of people got disciplined, I think, over it. And security did know about it at the time, Dee. So I think you're right. And there's obviously plenty of meat on the bones, put it that way. So we'll have to wait and see what Old Plod does, won't we?